You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Hey everybody, welcome back. How we doing?
Hi, good to see you.
Doing pretty good.
To be seen. Awesome. Well, I was thinking about last week, right? And I was talking about species that have evolved due to selection pressures from humans, right?
Uh-huh.
That was a fun topic to read up on and just think more about. And if you search up that topic on the interwebs, there is a specific example that comes up that I did not use last week, but I want to talk about it this week.
Okay.
And it's the samurai crab, also known as the Haikagani crab. And it will become clear
this is on
eventually.
My list.
Well, it's going to become clear why I didn't talk about it.
Okay.
In just
I haven't
a moment.
heard of this crab before, by the way.
Awesome.
It sounds vaguely familiar.
I heard about this and I was like, okay. And I started reading up on this. As I was reading up, I was kind of going, boy, this sounds so familiar. Like, I swear I've learned all this before. Right. And that's not an unusual feeling. Like, I read a lot. I have a pretty extensive library of natural history books. I also watch documentaries and read research papers and go to educational seminars. Like, I'm a pretty voracious, lifelong learner. And Victoria and Rachel, you're the same way. Likely to our dear listeners, have a lifelong love of learning, which is why I assume you're here today. So at first, like, as I'm reading this document, I'm like, I just can't really place where I've heard about these crabs before. And so I ended up skimming the Wikipedia page. And for reasons I'll explain in a little bit, it has a long section. This is going to be out of left field here. It has a long section all about the history of a 12th century battle, the Battle of Dan no Ura in Japan. Where the, let's see if I can get this right.
Okay.
I think it's the Taira clan, which is also known as the Haika, fought the Minamoto clan, aka the Genji. And as I'm reading this passage all about this war, I'm going, okay, hold on a minute. This all sounds like crazy familiar too. Like, I absolutely know all about this. And I will say, I'm well read, but I'm not like a really big student of like Japanese history in the 12th century.
Right.
Why have I heard about this one specific battle in a 12th century civil war in Japan? Like, what is going? It's like a weird deja vu kind of experience for me. And the answer, of course, is a cartoon rabbit.
A cartoon rabbit.
Didn't see that coming, did you?
No.
You see, back in the wild time, no, it's not. Back in the wild time that was the 1980s, comic books were quite popular, and a number of artists were experimenting with these anthropomorphic characters that were like animals that would like run around and talk and do stuff. There was a number of comics like Critters and Anthropomorphics were two like big of these that would feature like new artists to do little stories.
Okay.
Some of these went on to become household names with comics of their own. The most popular was, of course, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I assume you've heard of them.
Yes.
So I happen to personally be a fan of a different series that also became kind of popular, but definitely not as popular as TMNT. This was the comic book Usagi Yojimbo. And this is the story of a rabbit samurai, Miyamoto Usagi, whose master was killed, and he thus became a Ronin or Yojimbo, thus Usagi Yojimbo. People assume that's his name. No, it's not. It means like rabbit Yojimbo or like rabbit samurai or rabbit Ronin samurai, basically.
Okay.
Now, if this sounds at all familiar, the authors the artist for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the author for Usagi Yojimbo were friends with each other and knew each other from being in some of these similar magazines. And so there were crossovers where both Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles appeared in the Rabbids comic and the Rabbit Usagi appeared in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So they he even appeared in like the cartoon. If you ever saw the cartoon, they'd be like, Usagi, our like Japanese friend showed up through some weird time portal. Because in his world, all the animals, like there are no humans, whereas Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are like animals in a human world. So there's some kind of time-space portal cross-dimensional thing going on there. Anyways, it's really cool because he was in the cartoon. I've got like action figures from one of my favorite comic book characters because they would never have happened on their own, but because he was in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I got the action figures. Anyways, you don't care about that. I do happen to own the entire anthology collection of Usagi Yojimbo comics that were reprinted in graphic novel form. They are amazing, and they are full of the history of feudal Japan. So it's there actually a lot of historical stuff in there. Because Stan, this was a guy who does them, is a big fan of history. There's a lot of history in there. And one of the most famous stories in the collection is this story of the grass cutter, a powerful lost sword, which is an actual sword that's in Japan that supposedly still exists, but like only certain people are ever able to view it because it's like a sacred object.
Oh,
okay. A religious object. But the story of the grass cutter in the comic book retells the story of the Battle of Dan no Ura, and the samurai crabs feature heavily in the retelling of the story. And I was like, oh, of course, that's why this is all so familiar. So it was really funny to come across this week's topic and realize that, yes, I'm a giant nerd, and it is a story that is detailed in a book in my extensive library, but it's from a comic book, not from a natural history book, which really took me a minute to figure out. So, samurai crabs. Let's talk about samurai crabs.
Yes, I want to know.
One of my all-time favorite communicators, Carl Sagan, used samurai crabs to teach about evolution. And the story he told, and the same story that has been repeated many times, is kind of cool. The basic idea is that there were once crabs living in Japan, and fishermen would catch and eat them. But once in a while, the fishermen would pull a crab out of the water, and they kind of thought like the pattern of bumps on their back, or what we call their carapace, somewhat resembled like the face of a samurai. And fearing the crab was somehow like maybe the spirit of a fallen warrior or something like that, these crabs were always thrown back into the water. So generation after generation, fishermen ate the normal-looking crabs and threw back the ones that looked like a samurai. So over time, the crabs evolved to look more and more like they had faces on their carapace, as it decreased the chance of them being eaten.
Yeah.
So I want to share with you a photo of a samurai crab and let me know what you think. What do you think?
Well, there are also some drawings of samurai crabs that sort of
there
enhance
are.
It, right?
They do, but
yeah, I mean, there's kind of so
that looks like a face.
We're looking at the
that
crab.
looks like a face.
It does look like a face. There are sort of eyes that are kind of slanted toward the middle and bulgy out.
Kirk,
outy.
It looks like so it looks very similar to any like samurai-esque mask. Like I think of like Samurai Jack or whatever. Like any like traditional Japanese type mask that you see in like an art museum.
If you picture like an angry faced samurai mask.
Yeah.
Bingo. That's it, right?
That's it.
Yeah, totally.
It's so cool. If you want to check this out, you look on our Instagram. We'll definitely have it up. I'll put it up on Facebook too.
Oh my god! Yeah, it'll be on both.
Yeah.
But it looks like it has like a big
has
nose.
Eyes and a nose and an angry mouth.
Yeah, it's all there.
Big,
I mean, it's
cheeks.
amazing.
Yeah.
Some of the like the cartoons and artwork out there exaggerate it even more, but you don't need to exaggerate much. I mean, this is you look at it and you'd be like, oh my god, there's a face on here. Not only is there just a face,
there's an angry face,
a samurai face. Yeah, super cool. If you're not driving, you can go ahead and look this up now on our Instagram. If you're driving, just wait till later.
Yep.
We appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the issue though, and why I didn't include it in last week's show. These are very real, very amazing animals whose carapace looks exactly like a samurai mask. At least some of them do. There is some variation. The problem is, I'm not convinced this is due to natural selection.
Okay.
It's a good story, but from what I can gather, and this isn't just me, actual researchers have looked into this much more closely, and it's not that like people were eating some and throwing them back. This particular type of crab just isn't eaten in Japan.
It looks pretty small.
They're not huge, and it's sort of like, I guess you could eat them, but even like traditionally, from what I could gather from some of the sources, like it just wasn't really something people ate. And maybe the fact that they also looked like samurai was like, yeah, we just won't. I mean, maybe we're not going to eat them, but like it wasn't like this used to be a major food staple, and then over time, well, no, they all look like samurai now. We can't eat them. Like it sounds like it makes a really good story, but there's not a whole lot to actually support that that's actually what happened, right? So we got to be a little careful to make sure we have, there are really cool examples like we talked about last week of this happening. It's such a fun story, and my best bud Carl used it, but I think it probably is maybe an example we shouldn't be using, because it sounds like a lot of their research that's looked into it is kind of gone, yeah, no, that's probably not what happened. They just kind of happen to look like that, and our pareidolia, or ability to recognize patterns in nature, is like, oh, look, a face, which humans are really great at. So,
we love patterns.
Jesus and a piece of toast, samurai and a crab.
There you go. Or when I was in Texas, I was at the Laredo taco company getting my tacos, and the woman running the press for the tortillas took a tortilla out, and she's like, oh, and got all that, and we're like, what? And she holds it up, and there was a flaming skull emblazoned onto the tortilla.
I love
it. It was
that.
the most amazing. It was a skull, kind of like a 3/4 view, with flames licking off the back of it. It was
That's
the
so
most
cool.
badass tortilla. But you know what? It was just a tortilla, and it's just our ability to recognize patterns. So
everything's
tortillas are not my
painting.
topic. It was a samurai crab. Yeah, I just wanted to introduce the world to samurai crabs. If you haven't heard of them, look them up. They're super cool. There's not like a whole other story with them. It's just they're really cool, and I wanted to share them.
Well, thanks. I had not
Thanks,
heard of them,
Kirk.
and I feel richer for the knowledge.
You are great. Not the kind of richness you can make cash on, but you're richer.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a break, and when we come back, Rachel, your turn. Tag, you're it.
All right. Woo! Welcome back, everyone. Let's talk wasting disease.
Oh. Must we?
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't save this one for the
We're
Valentine
talking
episode
about
last week?
the deer
No.
chronic wasting disease.
Yes, we
What
are.
we're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
Yay.
So, as naturalists, we educate folks on quite a variety of topics. But one that I've found more recently to come more into the news and we get questions about, especially with, like you said, Victoria, concerning white-tailed deer, is chronic wasting disease. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and then share some news that might be hopeful.
How very strange of you.
Yes. So chronic wasting disease, or CWD, is a prion disease, which is spread through the environment or from animal to animal. It can remain it's absolutely horrifying. It can remain infectious in dead carcasses. It's infectious in urine of contaminated animals, in feces. It seeps into the soil or the water. There's even evidence, actually, that some plants can take up those prions into their stem or their leaves.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And can stay in, like, the prions will stay in the plants.
That
Why
makes me
prions?
so uncomfortable. If you don't know,
I'm going to talk
about what prions
yes,
are.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Because if you're not familiar with this nightmare fuel.
Oh, sorry. I thought about saving this for Halloween, actually, but I am not. So currently,
Yep.
CWD affects just the deer family. So this is the elk, the mule deer, the white-tailed deer, moose, reindeer, which are also elk, caribou, those kinds of critters. There hasn't been any like cross-contamination between from family to family.
Let's keep it that way.
We're gonna hope
let's
to
keep it that way.
Make
COVID look like a walk in the park.
Oh my God, yeah. So, which is good because oftentimes predators of deer will go for the sick or dying or injured animals for like an easy animal or for an easy meal, I should say. So like coyotes, crows will eat the dead carcasses, bobcats, and mountain lions.
Right.
So CWD, or chronic wasting disease, it is a neurological illness. A prion, and it consists of prions. So prions we all make them, and all mammals make them. They are a type of folded protein. That's all they do. The
idea that a protein can cause a disease is terrifying.
Yeah. So what happens in this particular case in CWD is the protein as it's being folded gets misfolded and becomes an abnormal fold. And
to be clear,
builds up.
Just protein 101, all proteins are folded.
Right.
In a particular way, and it that affects how they work in the body. Prion is a particular protein, and it sometimes gets misfolded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because of that misfold, it's
seems so innocent.
Easily disposed or broken down by enzymes in the body. What makes it worse is the misfolded prion, if it gets near other prions that are folded correctly, can actually cause them to unfold and refold in the misaligned, misfolded prion formation, which is bad.
Jeez.
It can cause damage. CWD causes damage to the lymphatic systems, so your lymph nodes, your like thyroid and all of that. And it also causes issues in the neurologic tissues. Because remember, prions are proteins. And a lot of proteins are in things like your brain and your nervous system, which is bad.
So real bad.
When I was taking microbiology, one of the sources that the professor gave us, I think it was an online thing, compared misfolded proteins to like evangelists that convert other proteins to their way of doing things.
It's like, hey, this is more fun. You should come over to this side.
Come to the dark side.
Yeah. So in CWD, over the course of a year, a deer, they might not show symptoms at first, but they're still going to be exuding and like excreting proteins through their saliva, through urine, through feces. But over the course of the year, when they start showing symptoms, it comes into losing a ton of weight. It's called chronic wasting disease because over a period of about a year or two, the deer is losing significant amounts of weight. It is wasting away. They will start to stumble, and they start losing their fear of things like humans. They'll actually come closer to people, which I don't like. That kind of reminds me of rabies, which I don't love.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anyone does. Nope.
Yeah. So what's wild too is that these prions can live in the environment without a host for years and still be infectious. So if you get into a bit of soil, and like if you're a deer and you eat like a plant or snuffle around some soil that was infected years ago by a deer that had CWD, you can contract it from that, which is awful. And they're really, really hard to destroy. Like if you used heat to destroy CWD prions.
Sure.
you have to at least hit 1800 degrees Fahrenheit to destroy the protein. Like
That's gonna have a bit of an impact on the flavor of the meat.
Yeah, it has to be like completely destroyed. Because even like 1100 degrees just degrades their infectivity. It doesn't actually like destroy them or impact them all that much. So it takes a lot. However, and so with all of this, there's not any vaccines, there's not any treatments. It's fatal to any of the deer family who contract it. If they get it, they're done. There's nothing we can do.
Ugh.
However, I did mention something. Did either of you catch it?
Said there was hope.
I did say there was hope. But I also said that it wasn't it was only present in the deer family, but there are other animals that eat deer.
Yeah.
So coyotes, prions
Right.
will go through their guts, same with crows, and the prions will still remain infectious in the feces of the coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
However, recent studies that were shared at the International CWD Symposium that happened in Denver, like this is very recent, like was last June in 2023.
Okay.
There's been some studies in mountain lions and in bobcats that used captive mountain lions and bobcats where they were injected with CWD prions, like in like a mule deer. Okay. So they were fed mule deer with prions, like a certain amount. Okay.
Oof,
and they were
Uh-huh.
right. Seems sketchy, but fine. And they studied the feces because in coyotes and coyotes and in crows, they're still infectious. It's the same amount that goes in one end, comes out the other.
Okay.
But in bobcats and mountain lions, 96% of the prions were destroyed.
Oh, what's going on in their guts?
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Only 2 or 4% were found in the feces that were still there to like reinfect further deer. And this is still pretty recent. So they are actually still figuring this out. The thought right now is that they just have more enzymes within their GI tract that are able to degrade proteins. They are carnivores.
Wow.
Mountain lions and bobcats eat a lot more. They don't
protein.
like, so do coyotes, but they eat a lot more protein than coyotes. They have a much higher intake. So they have to be able to break down proteins.
Pretty much only meat, whereas coyotes eat mixed diet. Yeah.
Exactly. So because of that, the microbiome, they're able to break down those proteins better, which allows them to, one, take it out of the environment more and prevent it from becoming an environmental like source.
That's good. That's good.
But hopefully by being able to study the enzymes and such in cats' guts, the mountain lions and in bobcats, hopefully we'll be able to come up with something to help the deer in the future.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. So like I said, this is like more or less breaking news that they are trying to figure out what exactly is causing the ability to destroy the CWD proteins. But it's still really cool that we're able to have that in the first place. Yeah. So my sources this week were the Deer Association, which covered the International CWD Symposium. It was an article called "The Guts of Predatory Cats Can Destroy CWD Prions." I also had the National Library of Medicine and the USGS and the CDC. So great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, it'll be Victoria.
Hey, we're back. All right, here's a little quiz for you. How many continents are there?
7.
Right. So if you ask my kids, also, they say 7.
Okay.
Right? You
Yes.
got Asia, Africa.
I don't trust you.
I'm
Asia,
nervous
Africa,
now.
North America, South America, Europe, Australia, and Antarctica.
Uh-huh.
Right?
But are you missing one?
7.
Are you missing one, Victoria?
Oh, we'll get there, Kirk. No spoilers.
I feel like we read the same article. Okay.
I'm nervous.
Okay.
Wait,
But
there's
first,
7, right?
what is a continent? What is a continent?
Right.
Okay.
If you
What do you
ask
call
yourself,
Europe and Asia
right,
different continents?
right. So if you ask yourself this question, it's easy to pretty quickly get into trouble because it's very hard to pin down what exactly we mean when we say a continent. It is a large area of the Earth's surface. Yeah, this episode is all about the boxes.
Oh God.
It's separated in some way from other large pieces. Yeah, so Europe being a separate continent is pretty much geographically nonsense. It's
Right.
culture, really. It's convention and culture.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So Eurasia is really a continent, but actually Eurasia and Africa are also one contiguous landmass. Afro-Eurasia.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and North and South America also are contiguous.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 continents? Geographically, yes. I mean, basically what we're talking about here is a cultural construct. And depending on what part of the world you're in, there's actually different teaching about how many continents there are. So here in North America, we learn 7. In Russia, not too surprisingly, they learn 6 because they count Eurasia as one continent, because that way Russia is not divided up over 2 separate continents.
That makes sense.
And in other parts of Europe, it's also 6, but it's a separate Europe and Asia, but they have the Americas as one continent.
Does anyone count like the India subcontinent as being its own continent? I know it's
not that I read, but it's possible.
I know it's on its own little plate.
Based on plate tectonics. Yeah, it's on its own plate.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that's where it's kind of getting to be like, well, it's doing its own thing.
Okay.
You know, it's a piece of land doing its own thing.
Well, you bring up plate tectonics. Let's talk about geology. Okay.
Okay.
If you ever take an introductory geology class, one of the first things you learn is that the crust of the Earth comes in 2 main varieties. We got the oceanic crust and we got the continental crust.
Okay.
And
which is truly revolutionary because we didn't know about this until like 100 years ago.
Yeah. And it wasn't settled science until 50 years ago.
Oh, so
that's
cool.
wild.
Yeah. Anyway, oceanic crust is relatively thin and dense. It's mostly made of basalt and some similar rocks. And continental crust is much thicker and is mostly, a big chunk of it is granite and similar rocks, which are less dense.
Gotcha.
And so continental crust sort of floats, if you will, on top of the Earth's mantle. And so due to the thickness and it's kind of floating higher because it being less dense, continental crust sticks up out of the ocean, creating the Earth's land. So by this measure, you could then geologically figure out the number of continents by counting the number of separate parcels of continental crust.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, and as Kirk alluded to, the reason I am talking about this week is that there was something in the news recently. Scientists have recently finished mapping a continent whose existence was not even conceptualized until 1995.
What?
Yes.
Hey, I'm older than this continent.
You're older than this continent.
Congratulations.
Woo-hoo!
This is the continent of Zealandia.
Yeah,
What?
Zealandia.
Zealandia. All right.
Zealandia, not Zoolandia. So if you
That's
haven't,
Zoolander's continent.
no,
Got it.
if you haven't heard of it yet, you might be able to guess from the name that it includes New Zealand. But you say New Zealand is mostly surrounded by water. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Fair.
The islands of New Zealand are only the tiny, sticky outy part of a huge mass of continental crust that is mostly hidden under the ocean, as it turns out. So the only other populated bits of Zealandia are New Caledonia, which has about 270,000 people. And then there are the much smaller Norfolk Island and Lord Howe Island,
Okay. Yeah.
which have like maybe a few hundred people each. I forget exactly. And there are some other islands that are above sea level but don't have anybody living on them. But 94% of the continent is underwater, which is why no one knew it was there.
But if you test the rock, like on the seafloor,
yes,
it's continental rock, not seafloor rock.
And if you map...
Even though it's rock on the seafloor, it's not seafloor rock.
Correct, correct.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
And if you map it, it's higher than in elevation than...
But the water line is just higher, is too high to allow it to be visible. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, and there are other parts of continents that are underwater. Like, for example, the islands of Great Britain and Ireland are part of the European continental crust, but
they're not connected.
English Channel is because it's a little deeper there, so it's deep enough for the ocean to have flowed in.
Do you know, like, when ocean levels were lower, like during ice ages and whatnot? I assume more of this would have been above water, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the existence of Zealandia, as I mentioned, was first proposed in 1995, and it was by geologist Bruce Luyendyk. And as I mentioned, it wasn't until 2023 that the mapping of the continent was completed, because it's hard to map things underwater.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fair.
It is estimated to be nearly 5 million square kilometers, which is about almost 2 million square miles in area, which is more than half as big as Australia. And
wow.
More than twice as big as Greenland, which is the world's largest island.
Dang.
Yeah. So this is super cool. It's a new continent. Okay. But as we've often discussed on this show, it's all about trying to put nature into little boxes, and we can run into a lot of problems. I haven't yet talked about microcontinents or continental fragments.
Oh.
So once you start getting into these, the definition of a continent
geologically,
into the
weeds now, yeah.
And also the specialness of Zealandia or any other continent starts to come into question. Is Zealandia a continent? Is it a microcontinent? What is it? It starts to become more and more arbitrary. So continental fragments or microcontinents, which are basically the same thing as far as I have been able to discover, they're essentially islands that used to be part of a continent but no longer are because of plate tectonics.
That's cool.
Yeah, so the biggest microcontinent is Madagascar.
The biggest micro...
Yeah, the biggest microcontinent.
Gotcha.
Madagascar was actually formed in 2 steps. So it used to be part of the supercontinent Gondwana, which was the one where all the continents were smushed together between about 600 and 100 million years ago. And Madagascar used to be attached to India. And when India broke away from Africa, Madagascar went with it. But then Madagascar was pulled away from India. So now it's on its own. And there are other microcontinents such as the Seychelles in the Indian Ocean.
It's a fragment. It's a fragment of another known piece of land, right?
Yeah, it's a fragment of Gondwana.
Okay.
Okay.
We know what it used to be attached to. It is no longer attached.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Seychelles Islands in the Indian Ocean are on a little microcontinent, the Azores in the Atlantic, and some of the Caribbean islands as well that are granitic, made of granite. There are many, many others, most of which you've never heard of, probably, unless you're a huge geology nerd. We even actually know about a future microcontinent, which has been called Ajan.
Ooh.
Many of you may have heard of the Great Rift Valley in Eastern Africa.
Right.
I know that I had first heard about it because some of the most famous early hominid fossils, like Lucy, were found there.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it is called the Great Rift Valley because it is a rift. It is
Yeah.
African continent is rifting apart there, tearing apart. And between about 3 and 20 million years from now, it will form a new continent consisting of the Horn of Africa and a lot of the east coast of southern Africa. So future microcontinent or continent, there are 8 now, arguably. There'll be 9 then, but it's all really arbitrary. It's really cool that they've discovered this new continent, but yeah, I started digging into it and I was like, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, were there any they found that were like fragments of continents that are otherwise not known? Does that make sense?
I don't know
this
how to
isn't a piece
answer
of
that
Gondwana
question.
or North America. It's just like they're like, this is the only place we find this fragment of this continent. It's the only singular location.
I didn't get that.
If you
deep
don't
into
know,
it,
you don't know.
But there are a lot of
because
these.
that seems like that'd be cool.
There are a lot of these fragments where it's debatable whether they're a microcontinent or some other kind of island that formed in some other way, and y'all just haven't completely settled it for some of these places.
Probably tough to figure that out. That's very cool, though.
Yeah, that's really fascinating.
My sources this week are the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute.
Nice.
Awesome.
The Geological Society of America, IFL Science, and Wikipedia.
Sweet.
That is what I have.
Woo! That was fun.
This is good times.
Yeah. Zealandia, everybody.
Zoolander.
What's that? We should do a trip. We should go visit all of our New Zealand. Yeah.
All right.
Amazing.
I love it.
Book
I'm
it.
here. Let's do it.
Sometime in the next 20 years. All right.
Okay.
Cool. Well, if that happens, you'll hear about it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody have a great life. Have a great day.
Stay well.
Yeah.
Yep, there you
Thanks
go.
everybody for listening.
Avoid diseases.
No, please. See y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.